The Messerschmitt Bf-109 is the most produced fighter aircraft in history. A decade after it first flew, the same designer built the Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter to enter combat. These two machines dictated the skies of the Second World War. But when the war ended, the man who built them was banned from touching an airplane. He spent the next 10 years designing prefabricated houses, three-wheeled bubble cars, and sewing machines. Today, Willy Messerschmitt's name is entirely absent from the modern aviation industry. The corporate entity he founded merged and dissolved until his identity was fully erased. The exact engineering philosophy that made his aircraft devastatingly fast and efficient also engineered his physical, political, and moral collapse. In 1935, the German military was secretly rearming in violation of the Treaty of Versailles. Their existing fighters were relics of a previous decade, open cockpit, fabric-covered biplanes that were far too slow for modern combat. Messerschmitt approached aircraft design with an obsession he called Leichtbau. Instead of building separate parts, he merged them into a single reinforced structure. As structural weight drops, the engine has less mass to pull, translating directly into a higher top speed. But Messerschmitt had a powerful enemy in the regime. Erhard Milch, the second in command of German military aviation, had spent years trying to bankrupt Messerschmitt's company after a test flight crash killed Milch's personal friend. Messerschmitt hadn't attended the crash site. He offered no personal sympathy. He viewed the dead pilot strictly as a data point, an engineering variable, not human loss. Milch openly favored rival companies and tried to block Messerschmitt from the new fighter competition. But the Bf-109 flew faster, dove harder, and climbed quicker than anything else on the field. The sheer physics overruled the bureaucracy. The Bf-109 dominated the skies over Spain, swept through Poland in days, and crushed opposition over France. Leichtbau had delivered exactly what Messerschmitt promised. But during the Battle of Britain, the fatal flaw of lightweight construction emerged. To save weight, the aircraft was built with a tiny fuel capacity. Once the fighters crossed the English Channel, they had roughly 10 minutes of combat time before they were forced to turn back. The weight-saving measures also dictated a narrow landing gear configuration. That tight wheelbase made the aircraft highly unstable on the ground, causing takeoff and landing accidents that destroyed approximately 5% of all Bf-109s built. As Allied fighters grew faster and better armed, Messerschmitt tried to compete by bolting heavier cannons and larger engines onto the 109. The structure was never meant to carry that much mass, and the airframe quickly reached its developmental ceiling. The narrow gear killed pilots on the runway, and the small tanks limited their reach. The design choices that made the fighter brilliant in 1936 made it physically treacherous and entirely obsolete by 1944. Messerschmitt was already looking beyond propellers. He designed the Me-262 to harness a completely unproven technology, the turbojet. Top fighter commanders like Adolf Galland flew the prototypes and realized the strategic implications immediately. The jet was 120 miles per hour faster than Allied fighters. Deployed in numbers, it could easily tear through American daylight bombing formations. Then Adolf Hitler intervened. Anticipating an Allied invasion, he explicitly ordered that the high-speed, high-altitude interceptor be modified into a low-altitude bomber. Dropping bombs required level flight at low speeds, negating every aerodynamic advantage the jet possessed. At the same time, the engineers were fighting the engines themselves. The early Junker turbojets burned so hot, they routinely melted their own turbine blades, giving them an average service life of just 25 hours. By the time Hitler rescinded his bomber order, it was too late. The jet program failed not due to a lack of engineering capability, but because the aircraft was trapped inside an irrational political structure that couldn't decide how to use it. As the war turned against Germany, American bombing raids heavily targeted Messerschmitt's primary facilities. In a single afternoon, an attack on his Regensburg plant shut down the entire assembly line for 4 weeks. To keep the company alive, Messerschmitt moved propulsion underground. He signed licensing agreements with companies owned by the SS, moving the assembly of his aircraft directly into the Flossenburg and Gusen concentration camps. This was not a passive arrangement. Messerschmitt actively shipped raw materials, tools, and his own engineers to the camps, exploiting a captive workforce of prisoners, whose life expectancy dropped to just 6 months. He stripped away human life to maintain his production quotas, with the exact same clinical detachment he used to strip weight from his airplanes. When Germany surrendered, the Allied occupation authorities seized the factories. Messerschmitt was convicted of using slave labor and spent 2 years in prison. Upon his release, a strict moratorium banned all aviation manufacturing on German soil. Desperate for revenue, the company turned to civilian goods. But the man who designed the world's most advanced fighters proved incapable of designing a functional sewing machine, and his prefabricated housing business quickly stalled. His most successful post-war product was the KR-175, a tiny 3-wheeled bubble car. It featured tandem seating and a hinged glass roof. It looked exactly like what it was, an aircraft cockpit bolted to 3 wheels by a company forbidden from building airplanes. He optimized his entire intellect to eliminate weight and increase speed. Without a military conflict to fund those extremes, his engineering philosophy had no practical application. When the aviation ban expired in 1958, Messerschmitt returned to the industry, but he was no longer inventing the future. His company survived by assembling Italian and American aircraft designs under license. Over the next few decades, his remaining business was consumed by a series of corporate mergers. Each new partnership diluted his identity until the Messerschmitt name vanished from the masthead entirely. The corporation that absorbed his legacy eventually became Airbus. Today, the exact same Augsburg factories that riveted together Bf-109s using concentration camp labor now manufacture structural components for the A320 commercial airliner. Willy Messerschmitt conquered the physics of flight, but because he viewed the moral and political consequences of his work as irrelevant data points, his legacy was slowly and systematically erased by the very industry he helped build.